I'm with Gil Hoffman from Honest Reporting. Now, Gil, what is Honest Reporting?
Honest Reporting is a media watchdog that monitors coverage of Israel in the international mainstream and social media.
Now, Israel experienced a horrific terror attack on the 7th of October. How did you hear about it?
Well, I keep the Sabbath. And on the Sabbath, I don't turn on my phone and I don't turn on the television. I was on my way to services for Shabbat and a Jewish holiday, in which we celebrate the end of the cycle of reading the Torah, Simchat Torah, with my little girl. And a siren went off in Jerusalem. And so we went back home and we entered a dark, empty bomb shelter. And throughout the day, we heard more and more, and we couldn't believe it.
Did you know what was going on, or did you look at the news?
I had no idea what was going on until really the holiday ended. And it's amazing that there could be so much tragedy. After there were 8 sirens, we knew something was going on, but Jerusalem was very far away from the action. No, at this point, we say don't open your mouth to the devil, but at this point, no rocket or missile has landed here in Jerusalem. The closest came was Bethlehem and Abu Ghosh, a mosque and near some churches.
Now, a lot of journalists have came to Israel. How well do they report the news?
Keep in mind that before this war began, we had actually had a record low number of foreign journalists in Israel. And then shortly after the war began, we had a record high. So that means that you had a huge number of journalists who have no background whatsoever in knowing the context and the history of what's gone on here, parachuted in, and were expected to be the experts, telling the world what's happened here. And so giving the benefit of the doubt to these journalists, it was an impossible task. But no, they've done terrible. They've made mistake after mistake after mistake, so many of them avoidable. They've hired people in Gaza who are open Hamas supporters without vetting them at all. And it's hard to cover a war in Gaza because there's no freedom of the press there. And Hamas controls everything there and journalists don't want to get killed. But still, people around the world need to know they cannot trust any information coming out from Gaza because it's terrorists are in charge.
So when we hear about something like 15,000 people have been killed, 5,000 of them children, can we not believe that? Can we not trust that because it's Hamas?
There are currently no statistics being taken in Gaza of civilian deaths. There have not been since before the war began. That means any number given includes people who die from heart attacks, car accidents, and old age, and being hit by Palestinian rockets that a large portion of which don't make it over the border, just like what happened with the hospital in Gaza that the world reported so incorrectly, accusing Israel of killing 500 people, mainly women and children, in a hospital being bombed from the IDF, and it turned out it was the parking lot that was hit by an errant rocket fired from the cemetery next door and killed fewer than 50 people. So people need to take that into perspective.
Now, the BBC is a British institution. How did they do reporting the news?
Well, the BBC is a 200-year-old British institution, and I've not found anyone who's ever found them apologize twice in one day. They apologized twice in one day for inaccurate reporting about Israel. Wow. First, they had an inaccurate report that said that the IDF had entered a hospital in Gaza to target Arabic speakers and medical personnel, meaning everyone who would be in a hospital in Gaza. When the accurate report was that they had entered with soldiers who are Arabic speakers and medical personnel in order to make clear that they're not there to harm any person functioning as part of the hospital and that they're out to arrest wanted terrorists. They apologized for that, and they said that their report was not up to their normal journalistic standards. And then later on, that same day, they reported that there were 10,000 Jews at a pro-Israel rally in Washington, D.C., which is true, but there were also 280,000 other people at that rally, and not just 10,000. and they had to apologize for that too.
Are they calling Hamas terrorists?
Well, the BBC at the beginning did not call Hamas terrorists in any way. Then when Prime Minister Sunak came to Israel, it's interesting that the one thing that President Herzog chose to focus on with meeting Sunak was to get the BBC to start calling Hamas terrorists. The day after, the BBC made an announcement that they will say in their reports that the Hamas are a recognized terrorist organization by the United Kingdom. Your listeners yourself can tell me if that has been implemented.
Now, how did Sky News, Kay Burley, do with her news reporting?
Before we get to Kate, I just want to say Sky News in general has been among the worst media outlets in the world in reporting this war. They have taken such a side in favor of the terrorists that it calls into question any of their reports on anything ever again, except for maybe sports and weather. Maybe they get the weather wrong too. You know, media outlets reported around the world that IDF killed 500 people in that hospital. They said 800. You know, they had to be even more on the side of the terrorists, even more inaccurate than everybody else. They still said 2 weeks ago that Israel had bombed that hospital. Even though it's been proven wrong, they know everything about what happened in the hospital. And they're still insisting on reporting fake news. That's Sky, okay? So Kate Burley, over and over and over again, has made mistakes in this war. She's made a fool of herself on the air. And so what happened with my good friend Elon Levy, that his eyebrows went up when he got a question about valuing Palestinian life less than Israeli life because Israel has had to release 3 Palestinian terrorists from prison for every kidnapped Israeli civilian released from Gaza. I'm glad that he set her straight. And if you watch the rest of the interview, it's not any better. And she, since then, has made a fool of herself again. Someone's got to take responsibility over there at Sky. Because aren't they owned by the same people that own Sky News Australia, which is a wonderful, very professional media outlet?
Did Hamas have journalists with them when they committed this terrible act on the 7th of October?
Hamas did have journalists with them when they committed this terrorist attack on the 7th of October, one of whom was a television journalist who reported from one of the agricultural communities in Israel just across the border immediately. That journalist, we know, was very much embedded with Hamas and came over. We at Honest Reporting questioned whether a few photographers were embedded as well, because the only people who came at that time were people who came to rape and pillage and murder and kidnap. The media outlets that they worked for later on in the war, or they sold to Associated Press and Reuters pictures, and then one was hired by the New York Times and one was hired by CNN. They were not working for them before the war began. So the media outlets have been more or less exonerated for that, but they hired them afterward. And that's very, very problematic. And if it wasn't for Honest Reporting asking questions about who these people are and how they got there, then one of the journalists who we focused on, Hassan Asliach, would still be reporting for CNN and the Associated Press. He is very close to Yahya Sinwar, the head of Hamas. People around the world should not have been getting their news from this guy. CNN and AP should not have hired him.
Is that not like a war crime or against the law to be actually running with Hamas and getting exclusive pictures in that sense?
Crossing a foreign border, joining a war makes you a combatant. And that's what he was. You're not allowed to cross a border with a gang of terrorists. For anyone around the world considering doing that.
Do journalists treat Israel fair? And if they don't, is this a form of anti-Semitism?
Well, there's a definition of anti-Semitism that's been agreed by the International Holocaust Remembrance Association, and it says singling out the one Jewish state for different treatment than any of the other 200 countries in the world. And so yes, the media outlets definitely focus much more on Israel, put Israel under much greater scrutiny. and hold Israel much more accountable than they do other conflicts around the world. And it was Colonel Richard Kemp, who was the commander of British forces in Afghanistan, who said that the IDF does more to minimize civilian deaths than any other army in the history of mankind. The world certainly doesn't report about the Israeli army that way.
Now, when the terrorist attack took place, there was also Arabs that were killed in this as well, wasn't there? Tell us about some of the stories from what have happened with the Arabs.
So Arabs have been killed in every juncture of this war by Hamas. First of all, rockets that don't make their way over the border kill innocent Arab civilians in Gaza. The rockets that make their way over the border have disproportionately killed Arabs and in particular Bedouin inside Israel. They've fallen in Bedouin communities that don't have mansions, right, and bomb shelters where people could go. And so because of that, too many of them have lost their lives. But it's not just that. Bedouin and Arabs have been kidnapped into Gaza because I guess they didn't ask them, are you Jewish? They didn't check if they were circumcised. And so a few in the last round that were released were actually a family from a Bedouin community. And there were Arabs who were murdered by their brothers from Gaza in the agriculture communities and in the dance festival where they went around killing people. In particular, there's an Arab medic named Iyad Darawshe who was just doing his volunteer work for Magen David Adom. Used to call itself the Israeli equivalent of the Red Cross, but because the Red Cross has been such an immoral and repugnant organization, I don't want to make that comparison. The Israeli equivalent of the Red Cross should be, if it were a proper humanitarian organization, not a vile, disgusting anti-Semitic organization that it's proven itself to be. So Iyad Darawshe was volunteering for Magen David Adom at the dance festival, treating people. And when the Hamas terrorists came in and started murdering people left and right, his Jewish colleague ran away and survived. He said, I'm staying here. I speak Arabic. They're not going to hurt me. They shot him from afar. He didn't get to be heard in Arabic saying, don't shoot me.
How has the reporting been as far as the hostages are concerned?
I believe that Israel received some empathetic reporting around the world about the children that were being held hostage, particularly about a 4-year-old girl with American citizenship. There are still children being held hostage in Gaza right now, including a 10-month-old baby. And there are still 20 women who are being held hostage in Gaza as we speak. And there are still 4 nationals, 20 of them being held hostage, including 9 Americans. So there's no end in sight for these people coming home.
Now, Israel is releasing Palestinian prisoners. So is the media reporting about who these people are, accurately, who they are, what they've done, why they've been in prison?
No, the media has not been accurately reporting at all about those released by Israel. Israel has been releasing convicted terrorists who tried to murder Israelis. When the criteria was set that Israel would not release murderers, it was a very nice way of saying that Israel would be releasing many attempted murderers. Why is that better? And unfortunately, the media, instead of drawing that comparison between murderers and attempted murderers, have been trying to make a false moral equivalence between this little girl that was held hostage by Hamas in Gaza who got out, and they say a child. Okay, so a 17-year-old boy who tried to stab people, and because he didn't succeed in killing them, now got out to go to the streets and murder again.
And they're on the streets today, aren't they?
They are on the streets very close by here. I live in Jerusalem and work in Jerusalem, and a large percentage of those released have gone back on the streets over here. There was an attack at a bus stop last week in Jerusalem. The 2 brothers, the terrorists who committed the attack, were from the neighborhood right next door to mine. That doesn't make me feel particularly safe.
Do you think Israel today is winning the media war?
I think Israel at the start of this war was winning the media war. Israel received empathy immediately when it began because people realized that you had more Jews killed in one day than any day in history other than the Holocaust. and that allowed Israel to receive some empathy around the world. But as October 7th got farther and farther away, then the positive coverage of Israel diminished, and as people reported more about what was happening in Gaza, the negative coverage increased. And yet, I still do believe that because the media has made so many errors during this war, that because of that, the pressure that would come on Israel to end the war has been less. There would be pressure directly or indirectly on President Biden and Sunak and Macron and the other leaders of the world, and it hasn't been as strong as it would have been. If I would have told you on October 6th that President Biden wouldn't allow Netanyahu to have a war go on in Gaza for 60 days, you would have thought I'm crazy. And it's happening. That's a sign that Israel is, I don't know about winning the media war, but certainly being somewhat effective on it. And it's not just Israel. It's people who care about Israel around the world. It's Christian supporters of Israel around the world who are on social media and making an impact there, whether it's just to their family and friends that follow them on social media or whether it's people of a larger number. It all helps Israel win on that media battlefield, which is the key to winning on the military battlefield. Every time a listener to this show shares information that they got from a pro-Israel website like honestreporting.com, they are helping save lives, Jewish, Christian, and Arab lives in this war. And they can all do so much more. Please follow Honest Reporting on Facebook and X and Instagram and TikTok and even LinkedIn. It all goes a long way.
When the media get it wrong, do they come back and correct it? And is it too late when they do correct it?
When the media get it wrong, they sometimes correct it and sometimes they don't. Sometimes they correct things behind the scenes that we point out to them. They wrote that Tel Aviv is the capital of Israel, and then they'll fix it really quickly. And sometimes they make a series of errors that are egregious, and then we have to shame them on social media and in the articles that we put out to the people who go to honestreporting.com/subscribe. But we've been getting corrections every single day. But unfortunately, some things they don't correct. And it does do damage when incorrect reporting is out there. The incorrect report about Israel bombing the hospital, well, there were violent protests around the world due to those false reports. And once it's out there, it's hard to put the toothpaste back into the tube.
Are you surprised with the media and how they portray Israel?
Am I surprised with the media and how they portray Israel? I was surprised with the positive coverage at the beginning. I was surprised to see Anderson Cooper cry on TV, and he really proved himself to be a good man. He had video footage of a young man being kidnapped, and he interviewed his parents. And at the end of the interview, he asked them if he could call them personally. And they said, sure, yeah. And when he called them, he told them that just before going on the air, he had found this footage of their son being kidnapped. And he could have asked it on live TV. It would have been a great television moment to, shock these people and see their son being kidnapped on live TV. And he didn't. He chose to be a human being before being a journalist. And others have made the opposite choice.
We need to remember as well, don't we, even though we're seeing pictures at the moment of what's going on in Gaza, there are still hostages out there and in Gaza away from their families.
Yes, there are still 137 Israelis, men, women, and children, who are kidnapped, being held in Gaza.
What is your prayer for the future of Honest Reporting?
My prayer for the future of Honest Reporting is that we'll continue to save lives by pointing out incorrect reporting that results in unnecessary deaths, and that we'll engage more people around the world in that very important task, get more people to follow us on social media. Since the start of the war, we have gained about 75 million people coming and seeing our content on social media. in under 2 months, of which 45.6% are under 25, 74.5% under 35, and 90% under my age, which is 46. That shows that we're making an impact outside of the pro-Israel echo chamber and putting out content that people want to see. So that gives me a lot of hope. And my hope for the world is that Israel defeating Hamas in this war will weaken terror that struck England on 7/7 and struck America on 9/11 and has wreaked too much havoc around the world.
What's your website, Facebook page again for people who'd like to know more?
honestreporting.com. I encourage people in particular to go honestreporting.com/subscribe to get our content. honestreporting.com/take-action to be involved in sending letters to the editor, knowing where to go and what to do, and complaining. And there's also honestreporting.com/donate. We need all the help we could get.
Okay, Gil, thank you very much.
My pleasure, and Merry Christmas to your audience.